All right, so you want to dive into the death of Tim Russert. For those who maybe don't instantly recognize the name, Russert was a total powerhouse in political journalism, the longtime host of Meet the Press, a familiar face on NBC, and really shaped the way we understand political discourse. What you sent is really intriguing, an audio clip that mentions Russert's death, but alongside some pretty loaded terms. John Kerry, the 2004 election, and of course the infamous Skull and Bones Society.
It is a heady mix, isn't it? It's almost like stumbling onto a conspiracy theory in the making.
Exactly. So while we unpack this, let's be clear about our mission. We're not here to jump to conclusions. We're here to dissect what's in this clip, examine the official narrative around Russert's passing, and just see if there are any threads worth pulling on. Before we even get to the audio, what's your take on the Skull and Bones connection? Why does it raise eyebrows even before we know the specifics of what these people are saying?
Well, Skull and Bones has this almost mythical reputation. It's a secretive society at Yale, and its alumni list reads like a who's who of American power. Presidents, Supreme Court justices, business titans, you name it. It's this potent blend of exclusivity and influence, and that always sparks intrigue.
Oh, okay, so knowing that, let's get to the audio itself. In this clip, they're talking about John Kerry's presidential run back in 2004, specifically how Kerry and Russert were both bonesmen. And here's where it gets interesting.
The connection isn't just stated as a fun fact, it's presented in a suggestive way, almost implying that this shared membership in Skull and Bones might somehow be connected to Russert's death.
See, that's what caught my attention, too. If this were just two journalists who happened to go to the same school, it wouldn't be a big deal. But the way they're talking, it's almost like they're dropping a clue, inviting the listener to connect the dots. But isn't it a stretch to connect Skull and Bones to this? What evidence is there beyond the implication?
That's precisely the question we need to grapple with. On the one hand, it could be just speculation, a way to pique the listener's interest. But on the other hand, it plays into existing suspicions about Skull and Bones. This idea that they operate in the shadows, pulling strings and influencing events.
All right, so we've got this seed of doubt planted. Now let's shift gears and examine the official account of what happened to Tim Russert, as delivered by his colleague Tom Brokaw. He announced that Russert died suddenly at the NBC News Bureau in Washington, D.C., at just 58 years old. He just returned from a family trip celebrating his son's graduation from Boston College. It seemed like he was at the top of his game, both professionally and personally.
Brokaw really emphasized Russert's dedication to his work, especially during that heated election year. But he also highlighted Russert's deep love for his family, his faith, and even his hometown sports teams. He painted a picture of a man who was not only brilliant and driven, but also deeply human.
And that's where the contrast starts to get really stark, doesn't it? We have this official story of a sudden, seemingly natural death. But then we have this audio clip with its suggestive whisper of something more, something connected to this shadowy organization. It's enough to make anyone wonder if there's more to the story than meets the eye.
Absolutely. And it's worth noting that Brokaw also talked about Russert's best-selling books, Big Russ and Me, and Wisdom of Our Fathers, both deeply personal reflections on his relationship with his father. He even mentioned how Russert had just been back in Buffalo, helping his aging dad move into a new place.
So on the one hand, we have this picture of a man at the height of his career, engaged in the world of politics, known for his sharp questioning. And on the other hand, we see this devoted son, taking time for family, for those personal connections. It adds another layer to the whole situation.
It does. It makes you wonder if there's something we're missing, a piece of the puzzle that would help us reconcile these seemingly disparate elements of his life.
It's like we're looking at two different versions of the same story. One is the official narrative, the sudden heart attack, the tributes to a respected journalist and loving family man. But then there's this other narrative whispered in that audio clip that hints at something darker, something connected to this powerful, secretive organization.
And that's what makes this so fascinating, right? We have to ask ourselves, are we simply drawn to the mystery? Or is there something more substantial here that warrants our attention?
I think it's more than just wanting a good conspiracy theory. Think about the context here. We're talking about a prominent journalist, someone who had access to powerful people, someone who asked tough questions. It's not hard to see why people might be suspicious, especially when you throw Skull and Bones into the mix.
Right. Because Skull and Bones isn't just an Y fraternity. It has a long history of producing influential figures, people who shape policy, who control narratives. It's not a huge leap to imagine that an organization like that might want to protect its interests, even if it means silencing someone who gets too close to the truth.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate for a second. While intriguing, couldn't this just be speculation based on Russert's high-profile position? powerful people die suddenly too, right?
Of course. It's crucial to maintain a healthy dose of skepticism. But I think what makes this particular case stand out is the timing. Russert died in the middle of a heated election cycle. He was known for his tough interviews, his ability to hold politicians accountable. And let's not forget, John Kerry, a fellow Bonesman, was running for president. It creates a context where suspicion can easily take root.
So we have this convergence of factors: Russert's sudden death, his position of influence the election, and of course the Skull and Bones connection. It's like all these pieces of a puzzle are swirling around, but we're missing the key piece that would make it all fit together.
Exactly. And that missing piece is what makes this so compelling,
Yeah.
so frustrating, and ultimately so unresolved.
Okay, so we've got this mystery on our hands, but how do we even begin to unravel it? Where do we go from here?
I think the first step is to separate fact from speculation. We have the official account of Russert's death, which points to a natural cause. And we have this audio clip, which presents an alternative narrative, albeit a very vague one. What we need to do is examine both narratives critically, looking for inconsistencies, for gaps in the information, for anything that might shed light on what really happened.
So it's like a detective story where we have to analyze the clues, the evidence to try and piece together the truth.
Precisely. And the first clue we have is the mention of Skull and Bones. It's not a coincidence that this organization keeps coming up in relation to Russert's death. It speaks to the power dynamics at play, the way this secretive society has infiltrated the highest levels of American power.
Let's dig into that a little deeper. What do we actually know about Skull and Bones? I mean, beyond the rumors and conspiracy theories, what are the facts?
Well, it was founded back in 1832 at Yale University, and it's always been shrouded in secrecy. The members, known as Bonesmen, meet in a windowless building called the Tomb, and their rituals and activities are kept strictly confidential.
And we know they've had some pretty powerful members over the years, right?
Absolutely. 3 U.S. presidents, William Howard Taft, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush, were all Bonesmen. And the list goes on. Supreme Court justices, senators, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, you name it, they've probably got a Bonesman in their ranks.
So it's not just a social club. These guys are serious players.
Exactly. And that's what makes the connection to Russert so intriguing. Was he simply a member of this elite club, or was there something more to his involvement? Did his membership somehow play a role in his death?
Okay, but let's be real here. We're talking about a very powerful organization with a lot to protect. If they wanted to silence someone, wouldn't they be a little more subtle? I mean, wouldn't a sudden heart attack in the middle of a stressful election season be the perfect cover?
You're hitting on a key point here, the plausibility of this connection. It's one thing to speculate to draw connections based on circumstance, but it's another thing entirely to prove a causal link. And in this case, the evidence is circumstantial at best.
So where does that leave us? We're back to that central question. Was Russert's death simply a tragic coincidence? Or was there something more sinister at play?
I think it's important to acknowledge that we may never know the definitive answer. There's the official story, which is plausible, but not necessarily conclusive. And then there's this alternative narrative fueled by suspicion and speculation, but lacking concrete evidence.
But even if we can't definitively prove anything, isn't it still valuable to examine these kinds of events, to question the official narratives, to consider alternative possibilities? I mean, that's what critical thinking is all about, right?
Absolutely. The pursuit of truth is always worthwhile, even if the truth remains elusive. And in this case, the very act of questioning, of examining the evidence, helps us understand the complexities of power, the way information is controlled, and the potential for manipulation even in seemingly straightforward events.
So it's not just about Tim Russert's death. It's about understanding the broader context, the forces at play in our society, the way power operates, and the way narratives are shaped.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that even in the age of information overload, the truth can be a slippery thing. It's up to us to be discerning, to be critical thinkers, to question everything, and to never stop searching for answers.
All right, so we've laid out the pieces of this puzzle: Tim Russert's sudden death, the suspicious timing, the Skull and Bones connection, and the unanswered questions that linger. But I think there's one more layer we need to peel back here, and it has to do with the nature of conspiracy theories themselves.
I agree. Because whether or not there's any truth to the suggestion that Russert's death was somehow connected to Skull and Bones, the fact that this suggestion exists tells us something about how we make sense of the world, especially when it comes to events that seem random or unexplainable.
Right. It's like we have this innate need to find patterns, to connect the dots, to create narratives that give meaning to events that might otherwise feel chaotic or senseless.
Exactly. And conspiracy theories often provide that sense of order, that framework for understanding complex events. They tap into our deep-seated fears and anxieties, offering a way to make sense of a world that can often feel unpredictable and uncontrollable.
And in this case, the skull and bones connection is particularly potent because it taps into our suspicions about power, about the influence of secret societies, about the possibility that things are not what they seem.
Absolutely. And it's important to acknowledge that sometimes. Those suspicions are warranted. There are real conspiracies, real cover-ups, real instances of powerful people manipulating events for their own gain.
So it's not about dismissing conspiracy theories outright, but about being able to evaluate them critically, to separate the plausible from the outlandish, to look for evidence, to weigh the different perspectives.
Exactly. And that's where critical thinking becomes so important. We need to be able to analyze information to assess its credibility, to be aware of our own biases, and to be willing to change our minds when presented with new evidence.
So in a way, this whole deep dive into the death of Tim Russert isn't just about uncovering the truth about what happened to him. It's also about understanding the way our minds work, the way we process information, and the way we make sense of the world around us.
I think that's a very insightful point. It's about recognizing that we're all susceptible to believing things that confirm our existing worldview, even if those beliefs aren't supported by evidence.
So how do we guard against that? How do we become more discerning consumers of information, especially in a world where misinformation and disinformation are rampant?
I think it starts with being aware of our own biases, of the things we tend to believe without questioning. And it means being willing to challenge those beliefs, to seek out alternative perspectives, to engage in civil discourse with people who hold different views.
And it means being skeptical of information that confirms our existing beliefs, especially if that information comes from sources that are known to be biased or unreliable.
Exactly. It's about developing a healthy skepticism, a willingness to question everything, to dig deeper, to look for evidence, and to be open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the death of Tim Russert, I think the key takeaway is this. While we may never know the definitive truth about what happened to him, the process of questioning, of investigating, of examining the evidence is valuable in itself. It helps us understand the complexities of our world, the way power operates, and the way information is used and misused.
And it reminds us that critical thinking is more important than ever, especially in an age where we're bombarded with information from all sides.
So to our listener, as you continue to think about this case, about the death of Tim Russert, about Skull and Bones, about the power of narratives, and the nature of truth, we leave you with this. What other rabbit holes are out there waiting to be explored? What seemingly mundane details in your own life might, upon closer examination, lead to a deep dive of your own?
The world is full of mysteries, full of unanswered questions. And it's up to each of us to be curious, to be skeptical, and to never stop seeking answers.
Keep asking questions, keep digging deeper, and who knows what you might uncover. Until next time, keep diving.
It's amazing how this whole deep dive started with, a simple question about Tim Russert's death. We had this audio clip, and honestly, at first glance, it seems like just another, a bit of political commentary.
Yeah, it is a testament to the power of curiosity, isn't it? How one seemingly insignificant detail can lead us down this rabbit hole of intrigue and complexity.
Totally. And as we've explored this further, we've uncovered so many layers. It's gone beyond just the facts of the case and into these broader questions about power, secrecy, the way information is controlled, and how we as humans try to make sense of it all.
We started with a specific event, the death of a prominent journalist, but we've ended up grappling with these fundamental issues that touch on the very fabric of our society. It's about understanding that things are rarely as simple as they appear on the surface. Right. It's about acknowledging that there are different perspectives, different interpretations of events, and that the truth is often messy and elusive.
And I think this deep dive has highlighted something crucial, the importance of critical thinking, of being able to evaluate information, to question the narratives we're presented with, and to form our own conclusions based on evidence and reason.
So what specific questions should our listener be asking themselves as they continue to think about this?
Well, I think it's important to consider the source of information. Who's presenting the narrative? What are their motivations? Are they trying to inform, to persuade, or to manipulate?
That's a great point. It's about understanding that everyone has an agenda, even if it's not immediately apparent.
Exactly. And it's also important to be aware of our own biases. What are our preconceived notions about the world? How do those beliefs shape our interpretation of events?
And how can we ensure that we're not just seeking out information that confirms our existing beliefs?
Right, that's the danger of echo chambers and filter bubbles. We surround ourselves with people and information that reinforce our worldview, which can lead to a distorted understanding of reality.
So it's about actively seeking out different perspectives, challenging our own assumptions, and being open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that the truth is often complex and nuanced. It's rarely black and white.
It's about embracing the gray areas, the ambiguities, the uncertainties.
And it's about recognizing that the pursuit of truth is an ongoing process, a journey of discovery that requires constant vigilance and critical engagement.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the death of Tim Russert, I want to leave our listener with this thought. The world is full of mysteries, full of events that defy easy explanation.
And while we may never have all the answers, the process of questioning, of investigating, of seeking understanding is valuable in itself.
It helps us become more informed, more engaged citizens, more critical thinkers, and ultimately more aware of the complexities of our world.
So keep asking questions, keep digging deeper, keep exploring, because the truth is out there waiting to be discovered.
Until next time, keep diving.